Now, let us try to understand some of the commands with respect to the memory management. Okay, we will try to quickly look into. Okay, basically, what is memory management in Linux basically, and what actually these commands does. Linux employs a memory management scheme involving concepts like virtual memory, paging, swapping, caching, buffer management, and many things. So, in the perspective of the memory management, there are like a different key concepts like managing the physical memory, that is the RAM available on your system, managing the virtual memory, swap space, paging. So, these are the different key concepts, okay, in the Linux memory management. And from the user perspective, what things are needed to do, or as per the requirement, what are the different commands to monitor and check these aspects, we can quickly look into. So, if I want to quickly see the memory usage, that is the RAM and the swap, okay, I can use the command like a free. So, in a very initial part we have seen that with the free command I can use the RAM usability as well as the swap memory usability, how much total memory is there, how it has been, how much it has been utilized, how much is available, and so and so, right. Another important command to look upon is like vmstat. Okay, basically it provides the information about the virtual memory statistics on that particular system. Another command we can use to get the disk space available on that particular system with the df command, which gives the disk usage on that system. Another usable command is the SWA spawn command, okay, which shows or enable disable the swap space available on the system. Okay. Then meminfo is another interesting command which shows the detailed memory information. If I want to get the information in detail, then I can use such kinds of commands. Then another aspects is regarding the Linux networking commands. Okay. So, while working on the Linux operating system, there are like a different peripheral devices attached to that particular systems. So, we quickly will try to see how we can work in that particular scenario, specifically when there is a network involved in with respect to that particular system. Okay. So, basically networking involves the configuration, monitoring and managing the different network connections like protocols and services. And actually it has the different network interfaces like loopback interface. It means that the same system, if one want to communicate with the same system, like in that particular case it is termed as the loop back interface. Okay. It is nothing but a virtual interface used for the local communication within the system, and for that scenario there is the default IP like 127.0.0.1. This is the default IP for the like local interface, and there are like some of the physical interface. Okay, like when we connect with to LAN, or maybe like Wi-Fi, and so many things like. So, every those devices consist of a physical IDs, or I can say the physical interface to it, right. So, basically Linux is widely used in networking because it has the powerful built-in tools for managing the networks from the basic connectivity to the complex network setups, right. So, just look at some of the important commands in this regard. So, ping is a command to test the network connectivity to a host. IP provides the information regarding the routing devices and policy routing. So, many things actually it provides. So let's talk about the another type of commands in the Linux, that's the Linux networking commands. Basically in the Linux, networking is one of the essential components, and actually Linux is widely used for networking because it has the powerful inbuilt tools for managing the networks from basic connectivity to the complex network setups. And like networking in Linux basically involves the configuring, monitoring, managing and network connections, protocols and servers. So while working with the networking in Linux, it provides the two kind of interface. One interface is loopback interface. Loopback interface means like a virtual interface used for the local communication within the system. And if one want to interact or have the interface with the another system over that particular network, in that particular case we can connect it through the Ethernet or Wi-Fi, and for those they have the physical interface, they have the different physical IDs, IP address for that, right. So when we talk about the different Linux commands, okay, so one, if I want to know the connectivity of the host to that particular like another device or the another host, I can use the ping command for that. If I want to show or manipulate the routing devices policy and routing, then in that particular case I can use the IP command. SSH is the command to have the secure shell connection from your local system to the server or vice versa. Like you log in from your local system to a supercomputer or HPC system. Just take an example here. If you want to connect to a server, okay, let us say this is a server and this is your local system. So through the SSH you can connect to this server, right. And in case of the HPC, basically this is like the common thing one need to follow. Generally we have the local system, from that local system we have the IP address and the authentication like authentic users of this particular system. Then through the SSH via the secure shell we generally try to connect or take the access of this particular system, do some work on this particular system and we get the output from this. So in all aspects this SSH utility comes into the picture and it helps. Like for example, I just take an example from my local system, okay, I just log into another server, okay, with this by using command like this SSH, then I provide the credentials of the users on that particular server. So this is the username and I will just provide the IP address of that particular device, and then it will ask some of the passwords and authentication, where if everything works fine, then you can see that okay, now I have connected to that system. So initially I was on this my local system, now I have connected to the server system and which is having the this particular content and something. So initially on local system I had different content, when I try to log in and when I logged into this system I have the different content. So in that scenario I can connect to different servers by using utility called as SSH, right. If I want to download or retrieve some of the files from the web, then in that particular case I can use the wget command in the from the networking perspective, right. And if I want to copy securely some files from my local system to the server or to another device securely, in that particular case I can use the SCP command. As we have used the SSH command to connect, have the secure connection between these two systems, I use the SSH, but if I want to transfer some of the files or data from local system to the server or another system, I can use the SCP command. So this is just a brief of this particular session. So what we have learned in this session, initially we tried to understand some of the concepts or some of the commands for knowing your systems, okay, your users. Then we try to understand like practically the commands from the files, managing the files and directories. Then we try to look for the file permissions and ownership of the command, like ownership of that particular files the respective commands we are looked into. Then we try to understand some of the process management commands in the Linux. Then we deeply understood some of the widely used text processing commands, and finally we quickly looked into the memory management and networking commands. So in short, basically these commands help you to work on any Linux powered system. So this knowledge will enable you to start writing the jobs, start writing the scripts for the Linux powered system, for your local system, as well as the systems having the high compute capabilities like HPC and those. So these are like from the user perspective, if you are equipped with these commands, then you will be able to utilize the Linux system efficiently and in a proper in all aspects basically. So this is all about the Linux commands. In the next session, we will try to use the knowledge of these commands to write some automation scripts, where we will try to see how one can write the scripts, the big series of big commands in a single go, how one can fire those commands, so that in a single go you can perform the different tasks at the time. Okay. So those aspects we will try to see in the next lecture. Okay. So with that, thank you very much.